you got so many points for being in the service, so many points for being overseas, so many points for being married, so many points if you got medals. And we had a lot of top level veteran navigators who had come back from combat loaded with ribbons. And they all had like 130, 140 points. But the point system in May had all of those sent home. Now, it's kind of leveled down. And I think I had 76 points because I had been overseas not quite a year. I was married. And I had almost 5 years service. So the next time in June, we got together and they would take us in and interview us and wanted to know, do you want to re-enlist? So I took my papers and left. Sent a telegram home to Ginny. Pappy's coming home. Buy half a dozen white shirts. 15 and a half, 35.
Yep. Yeah, that's what I wear.
Huh?
That's what I wear.
Uh-huh.
So then you went back to New York.
What?
Then you went back to New York?
Yes. And Ginny was staying at her uncle's house in Rockville Center, and they invited me to come out, and our whole family would stay there for a while. And I had, because I was a veteran, I had papers to get gasoline. You could hardly get gasoline.
Mm-hmm.
And because I could get gasoline, her uncle let me drive his car, and I'd have more than enough for my use and for his use. And I went to all the different airlines trying to get a job. Boy, I hit them all. Couldn't get it. I went to TWA in Kansas City. Couldn't get hired. Went to TWA in Washington, D.C. to fly internationally. Couldn't make it. And then I was in Washington one time. And, oh, I heard Al Sherwood, I had known him for years, and he was flying for TWA. He told me that he got in touch with me and he said, they're looking for you down in Washington, D.C. So I went charging down there, and all they wanted was to confirm something in my application. Well, he happened to be there and he knew the man who was hiring. And he said, here, sit here in the waiting room. I'll go in and talk to him. And he emphasized the fact that I had had 500 hours of Pt12 intensive training in the Air Force. So that put me well ahead of some of the guys who were being hired with 60 hours of Piper Cub time.
Yeah.
And they hired me. That's when it all started. Of course, what they wanted to do, they wanted to have every pilot on the Atlantic qualified as a navigator. So they sent me to navigation school. Wow, intensive. I started that in August. I must have been still at it at November or December. Like going to college course. Then I had to qualify on the GC4 and qualify on the Constellation.
Picking up milk and then I'll be home. I'll meet you there, okay? Okay, bye.
And the qualification on a DC4 was no problem. TWA had a Constellation crash in Reading, Pennsylvania. And the electrical wiring right through the skin of the airplane was insufficient in size or quality. And it started a fire. And the fire put a lot of smoke into the cockpit. And they couldn't see the cockpit. And they crashed. I think one guy survived. But the federal government grounded Connie's for a period of time. Then when the grounding time expired, I think it was beyond 90 days, that meant everybody's qualification on the airline on Constellation had expired, and they had to start to re-qualify everybody from the chief pilot down. And here I am way down the bottom. I finally got into a Constellation at Washington, and we were going to fly up to Reading, Pennsylvania to practice landings. And all traffic was stopped. The tower said, everybody hold your position. So everybody stopped moving. There was a military plane, I think it was a B-25, with some major, and I don't know how many others were on board, but the major was getting his flying time in for the month. He had to get 4 hours of flying in order to be qualified to get flight pay, which was half again as much as the base pay. It was a low ceiling, and he would break out, but it was high speed, and he had his gear up, which is all was dumb. And he'd up into the clouds again and around, and then he'd come back again.
You're married, you can use it.
And finally, in one of his passes, he said, okay, I've got the runway in sight. And he put the wing way down, and caught the wingtip on the runway, and started to spin. It finally slowed down and stopped without burning. One man got out, waved to the tower, was heading back to the airplane, and fell flat on his face. It was dumb.
Should we pause?
Are you finished yet? Not yet?
I was into qualifying in the Connie.
For whom?
TWA?
Huh?
For me. While I went to navigator school for about 6 months or more.
And then you went to?